4:47 a.m. Springfield, Illinois. A Sangamon County sheriff's deputy pressed his back against a cinder block wall and listened for the count. 11 miles east, a second team was already at the door of a ranch house on a county road with no name on the mailbox. The coordinated breach was 20 seconds out. Inside the strip mall storefront on South Grand Avenue East, a hand-painted sign still read Serenity Wellness Studio. $59 for a hot stone session. Walk-ins welcome. The lights were off. The ballistic shield went forward. The rear door splintered on the first hit. What agents found behind that door? A whiteboard schedule written in Cyrillic, 8 locked interior rooms, and 8 young women who had not seen daylight in weeks, would take 73 days of federal work to reach. It started with a single welfare check request that almost died in a dispatcher's queue. The investigation that freed those 8 women did not begin with a federal tip or a confidential informant. It began with a patrol deputy named Marcus Vela, who could not stop thinking about something he had seen on a Tuesday afternoon in early October 2025. He had driven past the same strip mall 4 times in one shift on unrelated calls, and each time he noticed the same thing. 3 young women he did not recognize, standing near the rear entrance of a wellness studio, being loaded into a dark-colored sedan. Different driver each pass. Same women. No eye contact with the street. No keys, no bags, no phones visible. Vela filed a welfare check request that evening. Standard form. Low priority. The kind of request that gets routed and rerouted and sometimes sits in a queue for 72 hours. But Vela drove by again the following Thursday. And then the Thursday after that. The same unfamiliar faces. Always accompanied. Never alone. On the night of October 14, 2025, at 6:12 p.m., he submitted a second request. This one he routed directly to the Sangamon County shift supervisor with a note attached. Same subjects, minimum 4 separate observations, no independent movement observed on any occasion. The supervisor forwarded it to the Homeland Security Investigations field contact in Springfield. The email arrived at the HSI tip line at 11:02 p.m. A duty agent logged it at 11:19. At 11:41, a supervisory special agent named Dana Holbrook pulled it off the queue and read it twice. By 2:15 a.m. on October 15th, Holbrook had run a utility subpoena cross-reference on the strip mall address. The electric draw on the Serenity Wellness Studio unit was 4 times the baseline for a comparably sized business in the same commercial block. The nail salon next door drew 800 kilowatt-hours per billing cycle. The phone repair kiosk on the other side drew 900. The wellness studio drew 3,800. That number does not match a massage business. Not one that operates 5 days a week with 2 therapists on the schedule. Something else was running in that building. Something that needed heat. Or light. Or both. Around the clock. Holbrook opened a formal case the following morning. Operation Serenity. Joint HSI Springfield and Illinois State Police. 73 days. The first week of the investigation was almost entirely dead. Surveillance agents parked at the strip mall logged customer traffic for 6 consecutive days and found exactly what the sign promised: a mid-range wellness studio with a modest walk-in clientele. Women came in for sessions. Men occasionally. They paid cash or card at the front desk. They left carrying the faint smell of eucalyptus oil and the relaxed posture of people who had just spent an hour being professionally attended to. Nothing about the front of the business raised a flag. The rear of the business was different. On the 4th night of surveillance, an agent cataloged the rear entrance activity between 6 p.m. and midnight. In that 6-hour window, the rear door opened 11 times. Of those 11 openings, 9 involved the arrival or departure of a dark-colored sedan or SUV, 3 different vehicles across the 9 events. In no instance did the women being transported appear to initiate the movement. In no instance did any of them carry a bag, a purse, or a jacket. In no instance did any of them look back at the vehicle as it drove away. The detail that stuck, and this came up repeatedly in the case file, was the jackets. October in Springfield runs cold. Nighttime temperatures had already dropped into the upper 30s. Women being transported to or from a normal job at the end of a shift carry something. A coat, a phone, a set of keys. These women carried nothing. One agent's surveillance log entry, dated October 20th, read, "Subjects appear to travel without personal effects of any kind," consistent with zero personal autonomy over movement or belongings. That line is as close as the official record comes to naming what agents increasingly suspected was operating behind those $60 hot stone appointments. The surveillance team had been watching the strip mall for nearly 2 weeks when a second detail emerged from the logs that changed how HSI understood what they were observing. The agents had been cataloging vehicles, plate numbers, make, model, frequency of appearance. On the 5th day of surveillance, a dark blue Chevrolet Traverse appeared at the rear entrance at 8:14 p.m. and departed at 8:41. It returned the following evening at 8:06, and the evening after that. By the end of the second week, the Traverse had appeared on 9 of 13 nights, always between 8 and 9 p.m., always departing within 30 to 45 minutes, always the same driver. The agents ran the plate. The Traverse was registered to the same Delaware LLC that, weeks later, would turn up on the ranch house property deed. At the time, the connection was not yet visible, but the vehicle was flagged for continued monitoring. Agents photographed the driver on 4 separate occasions using a long-lens camera mounted inside an unmarked van parked 2 businesses north of the studio rear entrance. The driver was a man in his late 30s or early 40s. He never entered the building. He waited with the engine running. The women loaded into the vehicle did not speak to him. They did not look at him. They got in, and the vehicle left. That behavioral pattern, the engine idling, the silence, the absence of any social transaction between driver and passenger, is one investigators and victim advocates who specialize in trafficking cases describe as a specific indicator. A normal rideshare, a normal carpool, a normal employer-provided shuttle. These involve some baseline level of acknowledgement between driver and passenger, even a nod, even a brief exchange of words. What the surveillance cameras recorded across 9 evenings of observation was something clinically different. Passengers treated as cargo. The missing persons angle emerged 11 days into the investigation. An HSI analyst cross-referencing the case against regional missing persons filings found 2 reports that had not been linked by any prior agency. The first, a 24-year-old pre-nursing student from Peoria. Her name for these purposes is Carla Reyes. She had stopped answering her mother's calls in the first week of May 2025, 5 months before the welfare check request reached HSI. Her mother had reported her missing to Peoria County. The report was filed, acknowledged, and assigned a case number. No investigative action followed within the first 30 days. The second, a 26-year-old waitress from Rockford, whose sister had filed a missing persons report with Winnebago County in late June 2025. The sister was specific in that report. Her sibling had mentioned, in a text message sent 2 days before she went silent, that she had been offered a job at a wellness center in central Illinois. The text named no location. The report was filed. The Winnebago County detective who received it noted that the subject was an adult who had mentioned voluntary relocation and that there was no evidence of foul play. The case was classified inactive after 45 days. Neither report had been cross-referenced with the other. Neither had been flagged to federal authorities. They sat in 2 separate county databases, invisible to each other, until an HSI analyst searched for active missing persons filings in a 200-mile radius of Sangamon County, matching women between the ages of 22 and 30. She found 17 filings. 2 matched the profile with enough specificity to escalate immediately. This is the part of the case that warrants a moment of reflection. 2 young women, one a nursing student still paying into a textbook loan, one a waitress whose sister knew something was wrong from the very first silent day, were reported missing through the correct channels. The system logged them. The system assigned numbers. The system did not connect the dots. What strikes us about this case is not the criminals. It is the gap. The space between what county databases know and what federal databases see. That gap is not malicious. It is structural. And young women disappeared into it for months at a time. Carla Reyes had been a third-year pre-nursing student at a community college in Peoria. She had a part-time job at a grocery store pharmacy counter, which is how investigators later theorized she came to the attention of whoever recruited her. She was organized, detail-oriented, used to handling patient-facing intake work. She had never been in trouble. Her mother described her to the Peoria County detective as the kind of person who called every Sunday without fail, who kept a color-coded planner on her kitchen table, who had been saving for a car she was 6 payments away from owning outright. When the Sunday calls stopped, her mother drove to Carla's apartment. The door was locked. The landlord let her in. The car keys were on the counter. The planner was open to the week of May 5, 2025. Several appointments were written in. None of them were crossed off. The detail about the uncrossed appointments is not in the official case file. It came from a conversation between Carla's mother and the Peoria County Victim Services Coordinator assigned after the January recovery. But it matters because it illustrates something important about what the missing persons system often fails to weigh adequately. A person who vanishes voluntarily for a new opportunity does not typically leave their planner open with appointments unmet. A person who vanishes involuntarily does not get to cross things off. The waitress from Rockford, her name is not part of the public record at her family's request, had been working double shifts at a restaurant near the highway interchange for almost 2 years when she went silent. Her sister described her as someone who was tired. Not unhappy, not troubled, just tired in the specific way that comes from standing on concrete floors for 10 hours at a time and then doing it again the next day. When someone offered her something better, a wellness center job, flexible hours, housing included, better pay, her sister said it sounded exactly like the kind of offer her sibling would have found credible. Would have wanted to believe. Would have gotten into a car for. That is how it works. It does not usually look like coercion at the point of recruitment. It looks like an opportunity. On November 3, 2025, at approximately 9:40 in the morning, a trash collection truck made its regular Monday run along the commercial corridor on South Grand Avenue East. HSI agents had arranged, through a city contact, to intercept the dumpster servicing the Serenity Wellness studio before the truck reached the compactor. The trash pull produced standard commercial waste. Packaging, paper towels, cleaning product containers in bulk quantities consistent with a business serving multiple people per day. One item stood out. A partial receipt from a burner-style prepaid phone purchased at a gas station convenience store 12 miles from the studio, dated October 28th. The receipt was torn. The phone number was incomplete. But the purchase timestamp, the store location, and a partial serial number were intact. Agents ran the partial serial against carrier activation records. The carrier returned a match to a number that had made outbound calls to 2 foreign country codes, one in Eastern Europe, one in Southeast Asia, over the preceding 3 weeks. The number had also sent domestic text messages to 2 other prepaid phones whose activation addresses traced back to a strip of motels along Interstate 55 south of Springfield. One of those motel addresses matched a name in an Illinois State Police intelligence database, a person of interest from an unrelated commercial fraud investigation in Bloomington 18 months earlier. That person had never been charged. But the name was in the system. The thread was pulling loose. The motel connection opened a secondary line of investigation that ran in parallel with the primary strip mall surveillance for approximately 3 weeks. Agents queried the 2 Interstate 55 motels, a budget chain property and an independently operated single-story motel with exterior corridor rooms, for registration records. Both properties had been visited by local law enforcement on unrelated disturbance calls within the preceding year. Neither had been the subject of any trafficking-related inquiry. The registration records from both properties were subpoenaed on November 8th. What came back was a pattern that, in isolation, would have appeared unremarkable. A series of short-duration stays, 2 nights, 3 nights, rarely more than 4, paid in cash, under names that did not match any driver's license in the Illinois DMV database. The front desk staff at the budget chain property told the agent who conducted the in-person follow-up that cash-paid, short-duration stays were not unusual. Traveling workers, people between leases, shift employees from the distribution center down the highway who needed a room midweek. The agent noted this response in the case file not as exculpatory, but as illustrative. These businesses process enough transient traffic that irregular patterns become invisible. Invisibility, in this context, is a feature of the operational model, not a flaw. The name in the ISP intelligence database, the individual tied to the fraud investigation in Bloomington 18 months prior, had registered at the budget chain property on 3 occasions in the fall of 2025. The dates corresponded, within a margin of 48 hours, with spikes in the rear entrance vehicle activity recorded by the strip mall surveillance team. The individual had used a different name each time they registered. Same physical description across all 3 visits, matched against the budget chain's low-resolution lobby camera footage. At this point in the investigation, Holbrook convened what the case file describes as a synthesis meeting, an internal working session where every agent contributing to Operation Serenity sat in the same room and walked through every data point side by side. The utility records, the surveillance logs, the burner phone receipt, the motel registrations, the missing persons cross-references, the ISP intelligence flag, 17 items, each individually explicable. Collectively, they formed a picture with a very limited number of interpretations. By mid-November, the investigation had expanded to include a second location. Utility subpoenas returned anomalous consumption data for a ranch house on a county road 11 miles east of the strip mall. The property was registered to a limited liability company incorporated in Delaware with a Springfield agent of record. The LLC had no business filings, no employees, and had paid property taxes on the ranch house continuously since February 2025. 4 months before either missing persons report was filed. The ranch house drew consistent high electrical load between 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. The strip mall studio drew consistent high load between 10 a.m. and midnight. The overlap pattern, plotted across 30 days of utility data, looked like a rotation schedule. Women moved from one location to the other on a weekly basis. The strip mall was the operational front. The ranch house was where they lived, or more precisely, where they were kept. I spent a significant amount of time going through the case documentation on this rotation pattern, and one detail kept pulling me back. The utility rotation held for 12 consecutive weeks without a single exception. Not a holiday, not a storm, not a weekend. The schedule on that Cyrillic whiteboard was not loosely maintained. It was enforced with industrial precision. That regularity, more than any single piece of evidence, speaks to the organizational character of what HSI was looking at. This was not improvised. This was a system. Agents established surveillance on the ranch house property beginning November 19, 2025. The approach was more difficult than the strip mall operation. The property sat on approximately 4 acres at the end of a gravel road with no neighboring structures within a half mile in either direction. A stationary surveillance vehicle would have been conspicuous within hours. Instead, the team used a rotating series of unmarked vehicles parked at 2 points along the county road, a farm equipment staging area a quarter-mile north, and an unimproved turnout near a drainage ditch a third of a mile south, and supplemented the ground surveillance with aerial observation on 4 separate mornings, using a fixed-wing asset coordinated through the ISP aviation unit. The aerial passes were flown at altitudes and approach angles designed to blend with agricultural survey traffic common in the region during the fall harvest period. The images produced by those passes were analyzed by a forensic imagery specialist, contracted to HSI. The specialist's report noted several features of the ranch house property inconsistent with standard residential use. Window coverings on every visible aperture. No exterior lighting that would indicate normal after-dark movement around a property. No porch lights, no motion sensor floods, combined with high interior luminosity, consistent with occupied below-grade or interior room areas where natural light was absent. A secondary structure behind the main house, approximately 12 by 16 feet, that showed signs of recent construction based on ground disturbance and roofing material age visible in high-resolution imagery. The secondary structure was never fully explained in the pre-warrant investigation. Post-breach search of the property identified it as a storage structure containing cleaning supplies, linens, and stacked commercial catering trays of the kind used in institutional food service. The ranch house was feeding a number of people significantly larger than any legitimate residential occupancy would require. The trash pull had given agents a thread. The utility data had given them a second location. But as of late November, they had no direct evidence of what was actually happening inside either site. Nothing admissible, nothing sufficient for a federal warrant. 3 months in, the case had a shape but no face. Then a surveillance mistake changed everything. On December 9, 2025, an agent conducting mobile surveillance on the ranch house property observed a vehicle departing at 6:51 a.m., earlier than the normal rotation window, and followed it to a commercial pharmacy 2 towns over. A woman exited the vehicle. She was in her mid-20s. She walked to the pharmacy counter, presented a piece of paper, and waited. The supervising agent requested a subpoena on the pharmacy transaction record. The prescription had been filled under a name that did not match any known resident of the ranch house property. It was filled by a third party. And it was a bulk prescription, a quantity consistent with a clinical setting serving multiple patients, not a single individual managing a personal health condition. That prescription record, combined with the utility data, the surveillance logs, the burner receipt, and the 2 missing persons cross-references, was enough. On December 19th, a federal magistrate in the Central District of Illinois signed search and arrest warrants for both locations. A sealed superseding indictment naming a third subject was filed the same afternoon. The moment the warrants were signed, the operational center of gravity for Operation Serenity shifted from investigation to execution planning. Holbrook convened the breach planning session on December 21st. The session lasted 4 hours and produced a written operational order that addressed 7 distinct risk categories: simultaneous timing coordination between 2 geographically separated sites, the possibility of armed resistance at either location, the welfare and immediate medical needs of individuals expected to be recovered, evidence preservation at both sites, communications blackout protocols to prevent any alert passing between the 2 locations during the breach window, transportation and intake logistics for recovered individuals, and post-breach containment of the suspect pool. The medical component of the planning received specific attention. The agents involved in Operation Serenity had, by this point, spent more than 2 months documenting conditions they believed indicated prolonged involuntary confinement. They did not know what specific medical conditions they would encounter on breach day. They requested pre-positioned ambulance support at both sites and coordination with 2 Springfield area hospital systems for after-hours intake of an unspecified number of patients with unspecified but potentially serious medical needs. The hospital coordinators were given no case details. They were told only to expect possible multi-patient intake from a law enforcement operation before 6 a.m. on a date to be confirmed. The raid was set for the new year. But the operation's timeline shifted when, in the first week of January 2026, surveillance agents observed what appeared to be increased vehicle traffic at the ranch house. 4 vehicles in a 12-hour window where the baseline was 2. The operational tempo had changed. Something was moving. HSI Springfield's assistant special agent in charge made the call to push the breach date forward. The raid was moved to January 14, 2026. Here is the part that does not make comfortable reading. The warrant was in hand by December 19th. The decision to wait, for logistical coordination, for the Illinois State Police entry teams, for weather and scheduling, meant the women inside both locations remained there for an additional 26 days after the federal government had legal authority to act. That delay was procedurally defensible. Coordinating simultaneous breaches at 2 locations requires time. A rushed entry at one site can compromise the other. But 26 days is 26 days. Unpopular opinion. The system that allows county missing persons reports to sit inactive for 45 days before classification, and then allows a 3-week gap between a signed federal warrant and a rescue, is a system that has decided, implicitly, that certain categories of young women are not urgent. That is worth saying plainly. In the days between the warrant signing and the breach, 2 things happened that are worth noting because they reflect the texture of how an investigation like this occupies the people running it. The first, Holbrook reviewed all 17 of the missing persons reports the HSI analyst had pulled in the early days of the case. She was looking to see if any of the 15 reports not already linked to the Operation Serenity investigation might connect to the 2 unidentified designations on the ranch house rotation schedule, the names that appeared in the Cyrillic entries before either Carla Reyes or the Rockford waitress had been placed there. She did not find a match. But she went through all 17 reports individually, reading the original detective notes, the family statements, the case classification decisions. She later told a colleague that she did it because she wanted to know who she was working for. Not as a category, as specific people with specific circumstances. She brought those files to every remaining planning session before the breach. The second, Deputy Marcus Vela, who by this point had no formal role in the investigation and no knowledge of its status, beyond what any Sangamon County patrol officer might reasonably be aware of, submitted a 3rd observation report in late December. He had not been asked to continue monitoring the area. He had not been assigned to do so. He had simply been driving his beat, and he had driven past the strip mall again, and he had written it down. The 3rd report added nothing operationally significant to the case. But it is in the file. Every observation Vela made from October through December is in the file. The case documentation does not editorialize about this. But it is there. January 14th, 2026. The breach team staged at 4:30 a.m. 2 locations. 22 personnel total, 8 HSI special agents, 11 Illinois State Police officers, including a tactical entry unit, and 3 HSI support agents managing communications between the 2 sites. The weather was relevant. January in central Illinois. Overnight temperature had dropped to 17 degrees Fahrenheit. Ice on secondary roads. One ISP vehicle had reduced traction on the county road approach to the ranch house and fell back 2 minutes behind schedule, creating a brief coordination gap in the simultaneous breach timeline. The ISP team commander held his approach for 90 seconds to allow radio confirmation from the Springfield site. In those 90 seconds, every agent on both teams held their position and waited. At 4:47 a.m., both breach teams received simultaneous go authorization. At the strip mall, the rear door went down on the first hit with a battering ram. Agents moved through the rear corridor under flashlight. The first interior door they encountered was standard commercial construction, hollow core, unlocked. The second door was not. Steel reinforced. Deadbolt. A numeric keypad with a cover plate over the interior-facing side, meaning it was designed to prevent exit, not entry. The breach team used a hydraulic spreader. The door opened in 11 seconds. Behind it, a corridor with 4 doors, all locked from the outside. Hasp and padlock. The kind of hardware sold at a farm supply store for livestock pens. Agents cut all 4 locks simultaneously. Put yourself in the position of the first agent through that corridor for a moment. You have been working this case for 73 days. You have utility records, and a burner receipt, and a pharmacy prescription, and 2 missing persons reports. You have never seen the interior of this building. You know, from the evidence, what you expect to find. And then the padlock comes off the 4th door and you are no longer working a case. You are standing in front of a 23-year-old woman who has not been outside in 11 weeks. The case file contains individual intake summaries for each of the 8 women recovered. Those summaries are sealed. What is not sealed, because it appears in the sworn affidavit supporting the post-breach detention hearing, is a general description of the conditions observed by agents at the point of recovery. The rooms in the strip mall location each contained a cot-style bed, a single light fixture controlled from the exterior corridor, a small table, and a bucket. There were no windows. There was no interior access to a bathroom. There was no reading material, no writing material, no personal belongings. Each room was approximately the size of a standard commercial storage unit. The light fixtures were operated by a single panel in the exterior corridor, meaning the women inside had no control over whether they had light or darkness. That detail, the exterior light panel, is one that appears in the detention hearing affidavit in a single sentence. It occupied considerably more space in the subsequent coverage by victim advocates and legal observers. The ability to control whether a person in a confined space has access to light is a specific form of psychological dominance. It is not accidental engineering. It is deliberate design. The building had been modified to produce a specific kind of helplessness. At the ranch house, simultaneously, agents cleared the main floor in under 4 minutes and located a locked interior staircase leading to a below-grade level. The door at the base of those stairs was the same configuration, steel core, no interior handle. 4 women were recovered from the ranch house. 4 from the strip mall. 8 total. Ages 22 through 27. Each one was transported immediately to a waiting ambulance staged 2 blocks from the strip mall and 300 yards from the ranch house perimeter. Each underwent immediate medical evaluation at 2 separate hospital facilities in the Springfield metropolitan area. Clinical intake records, which are sealed, documented conditions consistent with prolonged confinement. All 8 were admitted for inpatient evaluation. The youngest had been held for 41 days. The one held longest had been there for 73 days, the full duration of the investigation. 2 individuals were taken into federal custody at the strip mall site at 4:53 a.m. A third subject named in the sealed superseding indictment was not present at either location. The search of the ranch house produced the whiteboard schedule photographed by an agent at 4:59 a.m. The schedule was written in Cyrillic. It covered a period of approximately 14 weeks and listed designations that investigators cross-referenced with arrival and departure patterns from the surveillance logs. The schedule was consistent with a rotation of 10 to 12 women across the 2 locations over that period. 8 were recovered. What happened to the others is an open question. 2 were never identified. The most surprising element of what the search teams found is not the locks or the schedule. It is the ordinary surface of the place. A reception desk with a printed price menu, scented candles, folded towels in a cabinet near the front. The infrastructure of a legitimate business, maintained with apparent care, as a skin over something else entirely. The investigators who processed the scene described it in clinical terms. Dual-use premises is the phrase in the search warrant return. But what that phrase means, in practice, is a building where $60 hot stone appointments were available at the front desk and padlocked doors were 30 feet away. The evidence collection at the strip mall site continued for 11 hours after the breach. HSI forensic personnel documented every surface of the front-of-house operation alongside the locked corridor. The reception desk yielded appointment books, a payment ledger, and a collection of business cards for the studio, cards that listed a website, a phone number, and a tagline about restorative healing. The website had been live since March 2025. It had 47 five-star reviews on a national wellness service aggregator platform. The reviews described attentive therapists, a clean facility, a welcoming atmosphere. Federal investigators submitted a records request to the review platform. The request sought information on the accounts that had posted the reviews. The results of that request are not part of the public record. The forensic team also processed both vehicles recovered on the strip mall premises, a sedan parked in the rear lot and the dark blue Chevrolet Traverse that had appeared so consistently in the surveillance logs. The Traverse yielded trace evidence consistent with multiple occupants over an extended period and a prepaid phone wedged between the driver's seat and the center console. The phone had been wiped. Forensic data recovery retrieved 41 text messages and a partial call log. The call log included 3 numbers that had not previously appeared in the investigation. All 3 were prepaid. 2 were inactive as of the date of recovery. The third was active and, when queried by investigators, rang to a phone at a location in the Chicago metropolitan area. That location is part of an ongoing investigation. It is not discussed further in the public record. In the weeks following the breach, federal prosecutors in the Central District of Illinois filed charges against the 2 individuals taken into custody. The charges included federal forced labor statutes, transportation for illegal commercial activity, and conspiracy counts. The third subject named in the sealed superseding indictment remained at large as of the date this reconstruction was completed. A federal arrest warrant is active. Carla Reyes, the pre-nursing student from Peoria whose mother stopped receiving calls in May 2025, was among the 8 recovered. She had been held for 73 days from the date the welfare check request reached HSI. Her mother was notified by a Peoria County detective at 6:12 a.m. on January 14th, approximately an hour after the breach. The detective's call notes, which are not sealed, record the notification as follows. Subject located. Safe. In care of federal partners. No further information available at this time. The Rockford waitress whose sister filed the report, Winnebago County classified inactive. She was also among the 8. Her sister was reached by an Illinois State Police victim advocate at 7:45 a.m. The sister later told the advocate that she had called the Winnebago County Detective's desk 11 times between the case being classified inactive and January 14th. 11 calls over approximately 6 months. 11 times she was told the case remained under review. The comment section has been active on cases like this one, and the answer is rarely simple. The limited liability company that held the ranch house property was dissolved by court order 2 weeks after the breach. Its registered agent, a Springfield attorney who claimed no knowledge of the property's use, was not charged. The Delaware parent entity behind the LLC remained under federal financial investigation as of mid-January. A second ranch property, located in a neighboring county, was identified in post-arrest search of the primary subject's communications. That property was searched under a supplemental warrant. Agents found evidence of prior occupancy, bedding, personal effects, food packaging, but no individuals present. Whether that location was used before the strip mall operation or alongside it is not resolved in the public record. The 2 unidentified women on the whiteboard schedule, the ones whose designations appear in the rotation log, but who were not among the 8 recovered on January 14th, remain unidentified. Their designations on the schedule suggest they passed through the operation between late August and early October 2025, before the welfare check request was filed. No missing persons reports matching the description parameters have been located. Either they were never reported missing, or the reports exist under names agents have not yet been able to match to the schedule. The money recovered from the strip mall premises totaled $47,000 in cash, found in a locked cabinet behind the reception desk. Federal prosecutors have characterized that amount as operational float, where the larger proceeds of the operation went, across how many months, through how many transactions, to how many accounts, is an active financial investigation that has not produced public results. There is a line in the case documentation that reads almost like fiction, but it is not. Deputy Marcus Vela, the Sangamon County Patrol deputy who filed the second welfare check request on October 14th, who attached the handwritten note explaining 4 separate observations over 4 separate shifts, was not assigned to any component of the federal investigation. He was not present at the breach. He filed a report and drove his beat and waited for the system to do something with what he had given it. He found out the case had resolved the same way everyone else did. Through the local morning news on January 14th, the deputy who started the thread that pulled the whole network loose spent 73 days doing exactly what he was supposed to do. His job, on his shift, on his road, looking at things other people had trained themselves not to see. Whether the system processes that kind of attention correctly, consistently, and quickly enough, that is the question this case leaves open. The strip mall on South Grand Avenue East has been closed since January 14th. The Serenity Wellness studio sign was removed by code enforcement on January 17th. The nail salon next door reopened the following week. The phone repair kiosk is still there. The 2 individuals in federal custody are awaiting trial. The third named in the sealed indictment has not been located. The whiteboard schedule with its Cyrillic notations is in federal evidence storage. It covers 14 weeks of entries. 8 names, designations, not names, are accounted for. 2 are not. The network is dismantled. What it was connected to beyond Springfield is still